So today I want to talk about sexual satisfaction and first-time parents. This also talks about, obviously, these parents are either cohabitating or married. Okay, so my reading that I did was on Hansen and Alberg. They're Swedish, so I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing them. Okay, so little fun thing that I included in the beginning. I was actually talking about this article last night at my job, and my chef had a few choice words to add to it. He and his wife are having their second child. So his quote was, "I can tell you right now, there is no sex when your wife is pregnant with your second kid. It's a sniff, lick, and walk away deal." Also, my awesome memes. Okay, so I actually did 3 videos. They're each about 50 seconds long, but I thought that they really connected well with everything, and it also explains a little bit more and gives a little bit of nice statistical information about just general sexual satisfaction among parents.
You might have had a lot of fun figuring out how to make that baby. Now that she's here, it's normal to be worried about how things are going to work in the bedroom. New moms and dads share some common concerns, and have different ones too. We surveyed over 250 new parent couples and found the top sexual concerns of moms and dads are: how often will we have sex? Will changes in my body make me feel differently? When will we have time? How might mood swings change things? How often will we have sex? What if she doesn't want to as often as I do? It's totally normal to feel this way. Over 90% of new parents share your concerns. Talking about them with your partner is one way to lay it all out on the table. Hey there, Mom. You just had your first baby. And if you're worried about how that might change your sexual life with your partner, you're not alone. But how you explain these changes might affect how you feel about your relationship. If you feel like these changes are permanent, like you'll never have time for sex, or it's not important anymore, or if you create your own stories about how your partner feels, like that they don't think you're attractive since having a baby, you are more likely to feel unhappy with your relationship. Reminding yourself that changes to your sexual life are often temporary and being careful not to guess about what your partner is thinking are a couple of ways to feel happier with your sexual and romantic relationship long term. You just had a baby! That's awesome! You're giving so much to that new human. But don't forget your partner has needs too. Figuring out when, where, and how to have sex at this new stage in your life can be tricky. We found that when one parent shows understanding of the other's interest in sex, both parents feel better about their sex life and their relationship overall. But that works both ways. Showing understanding when your partner isn't in the mood for sex is also related to feeling more satisfied.
Okay, so I don't know about you, but I wish I had cat pajamas too, like the weird little pill bug people. Okay, so here's some terms, and here's my question that I want to ask. So what are the effects on marriage and couples with children and sexual satisfaction? Which also kind of, the videos give you a good little inlay to what I will be talking about later. So some of the terms I decided to define were sexual satisfaction, fulfilling one's sexual desires and wants. Intimate relationships, where both partners feel physically and emotionally satisfied in a committed relationship. Postpartum is the time after the woman gives birth. This could also be combined with tiredness, fatigue, depressions, the emotions that come along with after giving birth. Prenatal is the time before a woman gives birth, and then a dyadic, which I will be using this word a lot throughout my presentation, is a pair of individuals linked together in a romantic or family way. Okay, so what did they do? They sampled 258 parents from Sweden. All were heterosexual. The mean age was around 30 years old. All spoke Swedish to avoid confusion in questionnaires, which is a great thing to look for and make sure that nobody gets confused on the verbiage. All were married or cohabitating, and they also wanted to make sure that all the children that these parents had were all healthy, so they didn't put any extra restraints on the parents' relationship. So they wanted to look at more like sexuality, sensuality, so on and so forth. They didn't want to have like, oh, my kid has cancer, so really all my problems are on that kid. So what did they do? The method was a longitudinal study between 2002 was the first study done, 2006, and 2010. They recruited by primary care nurses at Family Health in Gothenburg region of Sweden. Wonder if there's a Swedish Batman? There's a really good possibility there is, because Batman in Swedish is something completely different. They also mailed the questionnaires out. So they asked parents once they were in the family health facility if they would take this, and then they signed paperwork and so on and so forth. It's a really long process. Okay, so what they studied. What they were looking at was relationship quality over time, sensuality and sexuality over time, gender differences between the husbands and wives, how they interacted, and what they felt. And then looking at the relationship quality of the parents when the child was between 4 and 8 years old. So the questionnaire, it had 5 main topics, and each topic had 36 questions. So they had didactic consensus, which was family finances, religion, personal leisure activities, aspirations of the parents. The cohesion was how they interacted with each other, laughing, talking, sharing thoughts. Sexual dyadic satisfaction was, how are you feeling? Are you positive about your partner? Is there a possibility that your partner and you may get a divorce? Where it's so just the feelings of the relationship and how well the relationship was going. Dyadic sensuality was more about the physical touch, cuddling, hugging, kissing, holding hands. And then obvious dyadic sexuality is more of, penile penetration, getting it in, and stuff like that. Obviously self-explanatory. Okay. So what they found was, I'm going to, out of the 5, they found the most significance between sensuality and sexuality. And I'm going to go on to my next 2 slides and show you some graphs that better break down everything that happened. Okay. So dyadic sensuality. They found that sexual desire, that the first year when the baby was born to the second year when the child was 4, decreased, and then it rapidly decreased between the ages of 4 and 8. And this shows all between for sensual desire, sensual frequency, and sensual contentment. Contentment kind of weirdly goes off at an angle a little bit, but there was still a significant change. For didactic sexuality, they actually noticed this honeymoon phase that was happening. So between the 2002 and 2006 studies, they saw that parents didn't really seem to care that much about sexuality, their sex life, and they were more worried about their baby. So the researchers thought maybe this is like a honeymoon phase, because you're not really thinking about, oh, I want to have sex, or my sexuality or anything else like that, because the baby's so consuming. So, but what they noticed then was between 2006 and 2010, there was actually a severe drop. Their thinking is that maybe the parents started to realize, hey, I want to have sex again, I want to feel sexy or anything like that. But either one of the parents were like, hey, let's do it, and the other one was like, no, or vice versa. Okay, so what does it all mean in the end? The results show that maybe if we educated parents during the prenatal stage, that they would be better suited for when postpartum came around and they became parents and they knew how to communicate with each other. That most mothers generally have a harder time postpartum between everything else that just generally goes on with your body, along with having to deal with motherhood and household work and an outside job. It gives these gives these mothers more pressures because of it. Now, they're not just identifying as a married woman, they're also identifying as a mother, which causes just more stress because now they have to change their identity in a way. Yeah. When the child is between the ages of 4 and 8, this is the most difficult time for parents sexually and sensually to be intimate with their partner. So when you have the baby, like, yeah, you have to worry about SIDS and cradle death and stuff like that, but overall your baby is very, you know, it's stuck there. It can't really do anything. But, you know, between the ages of, you know, the terrible twos, toddlers, you know, they're getting into everything. They want to know everything. Hey, don't put that in your mouth. And the next thing you know, it was like, hey, I left Jimmy here, and now he's like all the way over there in the other room or outside somewhere else. So I think that was a lot of the pressure between the ages of 4 and 8, which they were talking about in the article. And then it also seemed that parents put their desire for sex and to be sensual and pretty much themselves in general out of the equation. They were like, you know what, let's just get through these daily routines and just ignore everything else, which can't really blame them. Okay, so the limitations, which already kind of talked about, gave you a little teaser. The couples in the first 6 months of this study were considered in the honeymoon phase. That's why some of this stuff was a little bit skewed when they still had their full participation. And that's how the whole sexual thing, where it kind of seemed to go up and then it went down. So, and like I said, the dropout rate was really high. So if they would have still had all their participants throughout the entire thing, they would have definitely had a different results and everything else. Part of the reason that they think that they did lose a lot of their dropout was because of the surveys were mailed. So, you know, you only have so much time to get mail gets lost and everything else. They also thought that there's a good possibility that these couples were getting divorced and just didn't want to fill out these surveys, or, you know, one of the parents decided to move out, so they just couldn't fill it out correctly, so on and so forth. Another big thing is that these were all strictly heterosexual people. I think that maybe if it had been also included with homosexual couples, that there would have been a different outcome as well, especially because with heterosexual couples, like, you can have accidents, you can have these kids not on purpose, whereas homosexual couples have to plan. They have to go through all the adoption process. They have to already have a good foundation of a relationship. And I think that with homosexual couples, I think that they would probably stay together longer and they probably would have been able to complete this better. And then educational level, in the article, they talked about how people that had higher education levels actually stayed together longer and were able to stay throughout because they felt that they could communicate better, because of that they had the understanding to communicate, understanding that they needed to communicate. So, in the end, what did we learn? So what does this tell us about sexual satisfaction with couples postpartum? Most couples seem to have a dry spell after their kids, but though once the kids become more autonomous, more able to take care of themselves, and you don't have to worry about the kids setting the house on fire, sexy time once again comes back. Just gotta wait for it. And here's my lovely reference.